During this earnings season, several companies have cited uncertainty in Washington as a concern, right? With the final touches of a deal being made as we speak. Has this veil of uncertainty been lifted? In other words, will companies now, if we get the deal done, hire and invest? Let us bring in Diana Furchtgott-Roth, Bertil Potter, and Austin Liggett. All right, Diana, I want to start with you. CEOs have been moaning and groaning about, the debt deal and health care reform and Dodd-Frank, you name it. They've been complaining about it.
Right.
Looks like everything, good or bad, is going to be behind us. Do CEOs have any excuse for not spending and hiring anymore?
The debt deal has nothing to do with all those things that you mentioned. Come 2014, if a firm doesn't have the right kind of health insurance, they'll have to pay $2,000 per worker per year. That's a big cost, especially for firms who hire a lot of low-wage workers. The Department of Interior still hasn't approved drilling in the Gulf of Mexico following the BP oil spill almost a year and a half ago. The National Labor Relations Board is still trying to stop Boeing from using its new plant in South Carolina that it built to construct new Dreamliners. So all these things are still with us. The EPA is still regulating carbon, brought out a new set of regulations for ozone.
Yeah.
This is big uncertainty.
It certainly feels like it. And Myrtle, to be honest, when I was listening to all the details of the debt deal and I saw that initial very short relief rally this morning, I certainly didn't feel any more confident in the policymakers in Washington or in the future of the economy. Are
Right,
you?
well, you're
And
quite
should,
right.
should CEOs be feeling any more confident now, Myrtle?
I certainly didn't feel any more comfortable. As I was watching everything go down, it kind of felt like we stopped ourselves from driving the bus over the cliff, but the motor's still running and there's still a lot of people in it. So as I talk to CEOs across the country, I think everybody's happy to see that Congress took an action, but uncertainty is absolutely not off the table.
Exactly. And also some of these regulations that I just mentioned, they don't even need Congress. President Obama can just call up his Secretary of the Department of Interior. He can call up his Chief Counsel of NLRB. He can call up his EPA administrator. He can get these changed right now, today.
But Austin, I'll take the other side. Isn't it just a cheap excuse then, always on all these programs and bills, Isn't it an excuse for CEOs just to hoard cash, pay themselves, and pay shareholders more money?
I actually don't
Let's
think...
let Austin answer that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I spent most of my life in the service and the retail sector, and the first thing I'll say is CEOs don't pay a whole lot of attention to what folks in Washington do in terms of their day-to-day hiring decisions. They pay attention to what the consumer does, and the consumer, unfortunately, recessions are psychological events, and the whole way you turn around a recession is you persuade people that it's turned around, and we were making some good progress on that. I think the right wing of the Republican Party has gone slightly insane, and they've done trillions of dollars worth of damage to this economy
And therefore,
by
Austin,
convincing the consumer that we have a problem. And
well, we do have a problem because of our low GDP growth
problem.
rates. I mean, we have our problem. We saw the GDP growth rates on Friday, 0.4% for the first quarter, 1.8 for the second quarter. We actually have a problem. It's not as though conservatives are pulling the wool over consumers' eyes.
What drives that problem is the confidence of the consumer. And the problem that we have is the consumer is worried and they're fearful.
So what would change that? What would bring confidence back to the consumer? Just more jobs, Austin? I mean, it's sort of like a vicious circle. What comes first, chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Well, one reason for the change in the GDP numbers was the greater number of exports that we have, and that's because it's less costly to produce overseas than here.
Austin, do you want to answer that question about what would bring consumer confidence back?
You've got to have fiscal stimulus. I mean, this is empirical economics 101. We didn't do enough fiscal stimulus in the first place. We should have done.
Well, I got Austin. Then I've got bad news for you, Austin. Hold on, let me make this point and let Austin respond. Okay. I got bad news for you because you look at the numbers. We walked through with John Harwood. Social Security is just growing. They've limited Medicare cuts to 2%. So if they actually really cut a few trillion over the next 10 years, guess where those cuts are coming from? Programs that might actually add jobs, right? Infrastructure, energy, etc.
I also think that there's another problem.
The idea of cutting in the middle of this recession is the most ridiculous, counterproductive thing you could possibly do. And once again, what CEOs look at is they look at what's the consumer doing, are they spending? That's what they respond to. And
I
when they
also
see
think that there's
Congress
another
doing stuff
problem.
like
We've
this,
had an
it's
extra
totally unhelpful.
trillion in spending.
I actually
We've had
think
an
that there's
extra.
another problem.
Okay, just one at a time. Mercer, why don't you respond?
I actually think there's another problem. You know, if you look back at the recession between 1990 and 1995, the bottom line is that we came out of that bad time because small businesses created 75% of the new jobs. The fact remains that more than 50% of the jobs in this country sit in companies with fewer than 500 employees. So as much as I spend a lot of time thinking about the Fortune 500 companies and very large ones, we also have to understand that a lot of our growth and recovery is going to be totally dependent on whether or not these small companies can get credit, can deal with health insurance challenges.
Exactly.
Well, that's
and those
true.
were issues.
And if we have a penalty of
issues.
$2,000 per year per worker, then this is really going to discourage these small businesses from hiring. Plus, when you say we need more fiscal stimulus, we've had almost $1 trillion of fiscal stimulus. And what do we have? An unemployment rate that went from 7.2 to 9.2. It's time to try something else, like lower tax.
The reality is, fiscal stimulus is something you add until it works. The Chinese spend four times as much. The Chinese spend four times as much relative to their economy as we have, and it had a very positive effect.
You've been reading too much Paul
Let's let
Krugman.
Austin. We'll get Diana. This is like a Sullivan family dinner here.
Look, fiscal stimulus, you have to look at it. It works only as long as the Band-Aid is staying on. It's a Band-Aid, and I'm surprised you're sitting here basically saying you need stimulus constantly. When do you not need stimulus? Once you
We
get
are
on that
already
stimulus
borrowing.
bandwagon.
We're borrowing 40 cents of
Got us
every
anyway.
dollar
I
that
already
we
told
spend,
you,
and we
you
need to be borrowing
need
more.
stimulus
Okay.
until the consumer
Sullivan
is
family dinner.
convinced that you're recovering.
It's not quite as loud as a Sullivan family dinner, but it's as feisty.
Little Sullivans,
It's
big Sullivans. Thank
interesting.
you all for joining us today.